For our Be the Change segment this month, we are featuring Childhelp, an organization whose goal is to meet the physical, emotional, educational, and spiritual needs of abused, neglected, and at-risk children. I've invited the Chief Communications Officer, Daphne Young, to tell us more about this organization. We're also going to discuss the state of child abuse in our country, how this affects our country as a whole, and what we can do about it. Welcome to the show, Daphne.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So tell us, how does Childhelp define child abuse?
We address neglect, physical injury, sexual abuse, emotional maltreatment, and as you mentioned, spiritual harm of children. And I can even break those categories down if you'd like me to.
Yes, please. Yeah, I saw that on your website. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, the physical abuse is where a parent or caregiver causes a non-accidental injury to a child. And some of the signs and symptoms you might want to look for are not as obvious as bruises or broken arms, right? They are a child wearing long sleeves all summer long in peak heat to hide what's happened to them. Children who seem reticent to put their shoes on because they've been burned on the bottom of their feet. A child who's wearing a baseball hat all the time because hair has literally been snatched out of their head. It's heartbreaking, but watch for little signs that just where you feel something in your gut is off and this child is acting a little strange, and look for small clues to potential physical harm, because almost 29% of adults have been physically abused in some way. So we know this is happening to children a lot. Sexual abuse occurs when an adult uses a child for sexual purposes, and also when an older, more powerful child does the same. So peer-to-peer abuse is something you really want to watch out for in large households or in neighborhoods, and 20% of adults have experienced this. When a caregiver harms a child's mental or social development, this is one of the hardest things to prove. Emotional abuse almost is never prosecuted. And it breaks our hearts because it's usually a pattern of behavior that impacts a whole life. And about 10% of adults report being emotionally abused, but we know that every form of abuse has that emotional component, right? You can't go through any form without being damaged internally. And then neglect is when a parent or a caregiver doesn't give care or supervision, support to a child's health or safety. So that can be physical neglect. That's a little kid that you might see walking through the snow barefoot or never accompanied by a parent. But it's also emotional neglect, which is just the complete withdrawal. I mean, this show is all about family and kids, and imagine taking all that love and attention away from those children and just feeding and sending that child to bed. It's a heartbreaking aspect of neglect. Medical neglect, not taking a child to the doctor when they're harmed, and educational, not investing in that child's future. So much of your work, it sounds like, is like planning for the future and getting ahead of the future a little bit. And part of that is educating your child and getting them to the next phase that they can invest in their lives. And so when you are lax in that, it's heartbreaking. So those are just a few of the ways that kids can be harmed. And we try to have a holistic approach. And then the spiritual piece, we get kids who come to us with the quote unquote devil beaten out of them. And to have a chaplain on each of our sites to bring those children in and reconnect them with their faith or their spirit. And it doesn't matter what tradition the child comes from, Christian tradition, Jewish. We've had folks reach out to Native American spiritual leaders in the community and say, hey, we've got a child from your tribe. Can you come in and have those conversations because this child is hurting? So that's sort of, we approach it holistically, but those are just some of the forms of abuse.
Yeah, much like hunger, this is almost one of those hidden problems in our country. Because it might not be visible to me every day, could you let me know how many children are affected by this type of situation in our country?
Well, that's the great unknown, right? You mentioned it's kind of like America's best kept secret. 5 children die each day from abuse. A report is made every 10 seconds. So conservative estimates, you've probably got a little over 4 million child maltreatment referrals received. Then you've got probably about 7.5 million children as part of those referrals. So that's just documented stuff. 3.2 receive prevention and post-response. So that means there's enough horrible reality that we can take action or do something to help these kids. But what we know is there are so many children in the shadows of abuse. And if you had a chance to see this heartbreaking documentary on Netflix, Gabriel Fernandez story, we saw a story about a little boy who every step of his life, there were people that could have advocated for him. So many people called on his behalf, and we still lost a child like that in the system. And there are tons of children like this that we just don't know about. If you think about it, so much of your work is about home and family, and what breaks our hearts is about 90% of children are abused by someone they know. So it occurs in the home, often without witness, and a lot of these kids never get advocacy.
Something you brought up earlier is that not only is this affecting children, but over time, or as you've seen, the percentages of adults that have been affected by that in their lives is a high number. What does that type of situation do to our country? How does that affect us as a whole?
Well, there's a thing called ACEs. It's about 10 questions. If you Google ACEs too high, you'll find those questions. And those are adverse childhood experiences. So if you take that test, everything from the divorce of a parent, which is kind of a lower level traumatic event, but still, essential in a child's life, all the way up to severe abuse. And you take a test like that, and it impacts health. The way that study was done actually was a diet doctor, which is kind of a crazy way that we got all this information. So a diet doctor was having all of these pretty well-off women come to his program. Let's say they follow your model, they pay off their house, they have all this expendable income, they go and try to perfect their lives, and they show up at this diet doctor's office, and just as they're about to meet their goal, they drop off. And this guy's like, hey, this is a terrible business model. I don't get to show my success. They're almost there. They've reached their goal in this health and wellness program. And what he was discovering when he went back to interview the women is so many of them were survivors of sexual abuse, domestic violence, physical abuse, emotional abuse. And there was something about giving up on themselves and their health and their wellness. And what we see is that there are so many diseases and so many ailments that come from, and early deaths that come from being abused as a child. So it's a really big problem in our country. It impacts our health system, our mental health, our health care, everything that we need to thrive as a society. It starts with that little child, which is a blank slate. Anything can happen to that child. And here you have this wonderful miracle that can rise to the highest heights. And you injure that child time and time and time again, and you put them in the system, and you have an adult that can be damaged. I won't say they're damaged for life, because I've seen people come back like never before, and survivors are like the spirit of what we do. But boy, it puts a strain on everything that we do, and also that survivor goes through.
Absolutely. Talk about starting from way behind. I mean, I think I remember seeing a video where this coach or this individual said, hey, why don't we create a race where we see how far we can get in life, but if you've had these things happen to you, take a step back. And that was really impactful to see that. And I'm thinking of that as you're describing, the race of life. And if somebody has been affected by these things in their lives, how much more difficult their lives would be. So let's talk about the solution, or talk about how you guys are helping. What does Childhelp do to help abused children?
Well, one of our founders, Sarah O'Meara, who I work with every day, she's been doing this 61 years, and I still talk to her several times a day. She's running the joint. She's an amazing leader. And she said, you got to throw everything but the kitchen sink at this problem. So we have Childhelp villages where children who are so severely abused come and they live, and they do art and animal therapy. And we have a non-public school on the premises, and these are kids that just need to heal from the inside out. And then we have children's advocacy centers where law enforcement and prosecution and therapists, medical staff all work together to advocate for children. We have foster care, we have group homes, we have adoption, and the two major national programs that we have are the Childhelp National Child Abuse Hotline, which is 1-800-4A-CHILD, And that has 24/7 professional crisis counselors that are available to talk you through any forms of abuse. We have kids calling who are trapped at home with abusers right now. We have concerned citizens. This is maybe where your audience comes in, where you're just like living in a neighborhood and you see something that's not right. You call our hotline and you say, okay, here's my address, my zip code, whatever I need, my local CPS to come out right now. What do I do? What do I document? How do I handle this? And then we have first responders that are saying, I've got to go to work. I don't have childcare anymore. It's COVID-19 time. I am strapped. What's my next step? And also survivors who are awake at about 2 o'clock in the morning who are calling us and saying, I don't have my groups. I don't have the gym. I don't have office. I don't have all the things that help me self-soothe. And I'm just thinking about the past and I'm in a bad circumstance, and we'll talk them through it. So that's one of our major national programs. And then we also have Childhelp Speak Up, Be Safe, which is our prevention education. And that's where a lot of people learn about the hotline, and that's all about body safety and telling a safe adult. And it's one of the things I think should be in every school in the nation. I'm biased, but I believe that.
Well, you believe in the mission, and it sounds like this mission's been around for over 60 years. Is that right?
Absolutely. 61 years, and with our founders still involved every step of the way. So they have lived, eaten, and breathed Childhelp since they rescued 11 orphans, and we're now over 10.5 million children. So it's quite a journey.
Wow, what an impact. That's beautiful. So talk about the ways that people can support your organization if they're feeling called or feeling, filled up right now with your mission. What ways can they support Childhelp?
Well, over 91 cents of each donated dollar goes directly to the children in our care. So if I know your audience, the finances are straight. They can look us up online.
Transparency's good, absolutely.
That's right. And we have a critical relief fund. So if you go to childhelp.org, it's right on the front page. And we are directly supporting children who are impacted right now by COVID-19, trapped at home with abusers, texting us quietly from a bedroom, letting us know what's going on. And we can get law enforcement into that house in that moment while somebody is in another room, unknowing that that child is self-advocating, and every phase along the way. So it supports kids that are in desperate circumstances right now. We call them the shadow kids, the ones we can't find. Donating is amazing, and we need that, and it keeps all pistons firing. But you can also become a mandated reporter of the heart. So one of the things we're noticing is our hotline has gone up double digits. So we are seeing calls like in May 43% higher than May of last year. Now we're seeing DCS and CPS calls, your local agencies, go down. Why is that? Because teachers and coaches and all the people that take care of kids throughout the year are not seeing children. So if every parent, neighbor, community member could just keep their eyes open. We had one woman call in who was upset because her Grubhub food was disappearing. She said, these rotten kids are stealing my Grubhub food, right? And initially she's kind of like, this is frustrating. And what she discovered was that these children were starving. They had been abandoned in a hotel or in the apartment complex, and they were just coming to grab this food because they would see it on, a little tiny kid running out and just stealing a bag of food to eat and just, dive into it because that child was so hungry. And she was helping out a little sister too, who was even younger, and, here's some. And so they would eat whatever people were ordering. And so it took those extra eyes and an open heart to realize that these kids could be hurting. And they called us and we sort of talked through what was going on. And they realized that, yeah, I need to make that report and I need to help those kids. So just being, like I say, become a mandated reporter of the heart. You don't have to have a legal reason to reach out and take care of kids.
Absolutely. So yes, money can help, but also your voices can help, as well as just being aware of this issue. So I really appreciate you walking us through this, Daphne. As you guys are looking towards the next 5 years, yes, we've got an impactful situation happening right now. Where do you hope that this organization will go over the next 5 years?
Well, one of the things that we're working on right now is a concept called Define the Model, where we've been doing this for so long, but kind of in the heat of the urgency, right? And we haven't stepped back and said, okay, let's document all of the best practices. And we kind of do it through our regular tabling and reporting, but let's make it readable and accessible to people, not just in America, but throughout the globe. So we have this dream of defining the Childhelp model, getting it into every single state, but also getting global models out there so that they understand how a best practices advocacy center works, how you can set up a hotline, not just in a metropolitan area, but in a completely rural area, somewhere in a dark corner of the world that has very limited resources. So we're working with partners and trying to do some of that work. We've got a great grant for our hotline to be able to really study what we do. And so that's pretty exciting.
That's incredible. Well, I love your organization. I love the mission that you have. I love the passion that's coming out of your voice for your mission. I really appreciate your time today, Daphne. Where is the best place where people can go to learn more about Childhelp? And then if you could repeat that phone number again, I think that would be really helpful for folks.
Absolutely. It's 1-800-4-A-CHILD is the phone number. And that is for every child in crisis, but that is also for adults that need support. Especially, we're working a lot with young parents. It's also for teens that are stuck at home with their family and they're having a little bit of conflict, and maybe it's not broaching on abuse, but they need a little bit of extra support. So anyone, and survivors as well, anyone can call 1-800-4-A-CHILD. And you can also find that number on our website, which is www.childhelp.org, and you can donate there. You can call our hotline immediately. You can give to the Critical Relief Fund, and you can even create something called a fundraising team. Your crew, I think, is good at charting outcomes, so you can literally set up a thermometer. Your family can say, okay, the Joneses versus the Smiths, let's go. And you can do some fundraising for the kids and watch the progress just within your peer group. Again, just appreciate everybody giving voice to these kids because a lot of them are unheard right now. So thank you.
Absolutely. Daphne, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it too. Take care.